Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to the 100th episode of The Secret Witch Show. And oh my heart, we have a juicy celebration for you today. 100 episodes. Oh my goodness. Just feeling so emotional at that. And so, in a show with a radical twist, my dear talented soul sister, Jamie Wozny, who's been on the show before, so if you haven't also listened to her episode, I recommend you do. She has generously stepped in today to interview me about my journey with creating the show and liberating my magical voice, which I'm super excited about. So this is very much about how I created the show through the fear of being burned at the stake. And I've never before been interviewed on the show. So this is a really juicy episode. But before we dive into that, I've also got something exciting to share in that I'm creating something juicy for 2025. And I know this episode's going out just before that, so just to share a little bit more about that with you. I've been asked a lot recently about creating a kind of membership space where women can gather together and dive into the deep work. So I have been in the background magicking up, getting my Creatrix on board with creating this new safe space for us to journey together in what I'm calling a secret witch membership, where I will serve archetypal remedies, hold sharing circles, have a monthly clinic to help you journey with your self-healing and the discovery and expression of your gifts as a healer. So if you would like to hear more, it's not yet quite available, but I am collecting interest. So if you would like to be one of the first people to know when this lands, please head to nicolebarton.co.uk/membership. For now though, I'll hand over to the magical Jamie. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jamie Wozny, and I am a friend, colleague, and soul sister of the magical Nicole Barton from the Secret Witch podcast. I am honored today to be interviewing her for the 100th episode of her podcast, which we are celebrating, sending her some energetic sparkles in this moment. While you all know her and love her well, and you've been receiving this beautiful alchemical medicine from her over the years, I wanted to introduce her, and maybe you can learn her, feel her on a different level today. And then we're going to dig in and ask her a whole bunch of questions. And so you can really see yourself in her journey and have her story support you in your magnificent unfolding. So I am happy to be here with you, fellow healers. Let's dig in. Nicole Barton is a witch on a mission to help secret witches, aka secretly magical women who hide their power, to live their true destiny by expressing their unapologetic magic. She does this by helping women to heal themselves, discover their gifts, and heal the fear of expressing their authentic selves. Through her Top 10% Secret Witch Show podcast and her Archetypal Apothecary healing modality, which have helped multiple tens of thousands of listeners, Nicole guides women to understand their soul's unique plan and harness it to become the magical healer witches their souls were born to be. Today, we are celebrating, as we said, the 100th episode of the show. And so with a unique spin, I, Jamie Wozny, modern-day seer and priestess of the divine, am interviewing Nicole in this special edition, all about how and why she created the show and how she healed herself by sharing her magical voice and risking being burned at the stake for it. and what magic has been created along the way. Let's get to it, girl. You ready?
I love that. You know, it's so funny. I was like, press to record, and it's like so weird to just be like in the back seat, and I'm loving it.
Do we switch this from all the episodes going on forward now?
I feel like, yeah, you could just come back and do them all.
All the interviews are you. Hey, that's awesome.
Oh, I
Well,
love that.
welcome.
Thank you. Oh,
We're
no,
happy to have you.
yeah, I'm so happy to have you here as well. I feel like we're going to co-create such a magical episode, and yeah, it just feels really aligned and in my heart to like celebrate in this way. So yeah, thank you.
Yes. And actually, just a little backstory. Nicole and I heard her on a podcast. I don't even
Oh,
know how many years ago from a co-teacher of ours back in the day. Gosh, how many years ago was that? I don't even know.
I feel like
7. I'm bad at
yeah.
timing. Maybe even longer. And I never do this. And I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, you might think I'm weird, but I had that soul calling that you teach about." And we were so similar. It was as if we were like separated from the same soul family or something. I don't even know the words. And you were so receptive. You said, "Sure, let's get on tea and chat," and we've become lovely friends and held each other and supported each other. So it's an interesting full circle podcast moment for us.
I love that. Do you know, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot we connected through a podcast. I love
Yeah.
that. And here we are.
And
Oh, that's
here
so
we are.
gorgeous. That is
Yes.
magical.
Yes. So as we celebrate your show, are you ready to dive in?
I am, I think.
Okay. Yes, yes, you're in good hands. So I'm curious because you named this the Secret Witch. So
Mm,
maybe tell us a little bit about, and I can break these questions down for you if you need to, but why the Secret Witch and
yeah.
who is she?
Well, in effect, I mean, if anybody's listened to maybe the first episode of the show, I think I spoke to this then. I'm sure I must have done,
Mm,
surely. But I essentially, the secret witch was me. And much in the same way you were just saying, like, we were quite similar when we first connected. I think a big part of my own healing modality and the principles that underline my path is that essentially we're all remedies for each other. And so, as I kind of healed my own secret witch, and I'll tell you a bit more about who she is in a moment, but like that's ultimately like as I was healing my own secret witch and kind of journeying from secret witch to what I called at the time queen witch, like that was in effect me sharing my medicine. And so the secret witch, just to kind of like put her into like she's essentially a mirror or a lens for aspects of us that we deny and we
mm,
repress and we kind of hide away in shame. And so she was really like the reclamation of the three things I talk about is like feminine power, feminine magic, and like our truth, our full soul expression. So she was like the me that was to start with, as I before I healed and alchemized. And she was the part of me that was like really had created this successful life on the outside, but on the inside, like felt really trapped in the mundane. And this was kind of before I'd started the podcast, before I'd kind of really started to heal this aspect of me. But like this, the secret witch in me was the part that was like feeling trapped and stuck in this dull, mundane life. And I remember like being on the hamster wheel, being kind of caught in this mundane job and like really burning out. And
mm,
I was talking to you about this before we pressed record, actually, but like the kind of archetypal remedy that I would describe this person as is archetypal phosphorus, because phosphorus tends to be the kind of constitution that will burn out when she's not in a life that's aligned for her. So
mm,
this is a woman who's maybe like caught in the chaos of modern life and is secretly magical and powerful, but doesn't express that because there's this fear. And the fear could be lots of different things. It could be the fear of failing, it could be the fear of being seen as weird, it could be the fear of being judged or, not feeling safe to express our gifts. Like this was all me. And as I started to like heal and reclaim those aspects of myself by working with the witch as a
mm.
lens, as a mirror, that's really kind of where this inspiration for the podcast came from. I don't know if that was the question you asked, but
Yeah, no, that's it. I feel her. And yeah, we do. We all come together and we relate. And I love it's so unique, your work, right? And in homeopathy, it's that like heals like. And really you speak about this, but that we need to be an embodiment and that your being is enough. And
Mm,
when you are that, it just unlocks it and I think gives others permission, is what I took
mm.
from what you were saying.
Yes, I love that, and I love that you're, my key, like, like yours, like, I love that. You've been listening.
I've been listening. I'm a fan.
Um, but yeah, absolutely. My biggest belief is that people are remedies. And like in effect, that's what this podcast is. And I think that's one of the things that I want to celebrate most. And one of the things it kind of evolved into. Maybe we could talk more about that. But in essence, I
Mhm.
started out with it being very much about the witch and reclaiming the witch. And in essence, it's kind of become this like mini apothecary. Like you can take each episode out and it's like, oh, there's this remedy. Like we're working with gold in this episode, or we're working with, like moon in this episode, or we're working with, that each episode has its own remedy. And so I will often say to women, like, if you're diving into it, and it's been called like a treasure trove by people who've reviewed it before, it's just like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like if you are listening to it, there is always some kind of energy healing within the remedy itself, because I started to realize over the course of creating the podcast that I was actually, I would bring a remedy alive and somebody would respond as if they'd taken the remedy. So
Wow.
we kind of moved beyond traditional homeopathy, because homeopathy I say is now like the lineage of my path, one of the three ancient wisdom bodies. But like I started to see that my gift was kind of bringing these remedies alive as archetypal personality profiles, the which included, which is phosphorus, and then people would respond. People would have a healing response. So drink plenty of water if you're listening. Treat yourself as if you if you've had a healing.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Answering that is, wouldn't it be cool, and zero pressure, I just have a very creative mind. There was a quiz when you were coming into your podcast of like, what's going on? And then which episodes would be the remedy for whatever the secret witch was
Oh,
experiencing.
I love that.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
these episodes will help you with your fear of being burned at the stake, or these episodes will help you with your voice, or.
Yeah. I love that so much. We have been contemplating doing a quiz for such a long time because it goes so well with the remedies. But yeah. Yeah.
That's
Love
so
that.
magical. I celebrate you with that because it is so unique. I don't know any other podcast dosing. I mean, I'm sure that there is obviously that going on in the background, but in the
Mm.
foreground with you doing that, that is very manifesting generator of you, very innovative.
Mm.
Are you generator or manifesting generator? I
I'm
mess
a
that up with
I'm a
you all the time.
generator. I'm a
Okay,
generator because you are
then
too,
very
right?
yes, you're following your joy and doing this
Yes.
and light. Yes, yes, yes.
And I love that you say that, because really that's how the show evolved. It's like it started out where I was in effect like unconsciously serving remedies. And
Yes.
over the time where I was kind of, sharing and starting to piece together, oh, that's this remedy. I started to see, okay, because we were originally working with, archetypal personalities. So the ones that we more commonly know, the feminine ones like the mother, or the wise woman and the crone
Mm.
and the maiden and the lover, and like all of these kind of feminine archetypes. But I started to see like, oh, actually, when I'm working with the queen, for example, I'm working with Aurum, and this is like a homeopathic remedy. And so, what the podcast
Wow.
helped me to do really was to live into my medicine. So, I'm like super grateful to the show for that, like, and what it's gifted me.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of, I'm not even sure how to ask this question, but you just said what it's gifted you. I guess what are some of the gifts that you've
Mm,
experienced? I could just say it simply. I'm just seeing like maybe you went into it, and I want to get to that question next of like what was your inspiration for creating it? But what surprised you along the way of, gosh, I didn't even imagine it moved me into this part of myself that I didn't even know I needed, or what were some of the gifts or magic that were created?
yeah, I love that. And there's obviously some very practical ones in that, we became like a top 10% global podcast, which was a huge, like, that had been on my vision
Mm,
board for like years. And when it happened, I was like, oh my God, I just looked it up the one day, the rating. I was like, oh, what? I wonder what we are. And then I was like, oh, we're like top
wow.
10%. So is that on a very kind of tangible, human, practical level? But I guess it kind of offered me a way of like healing and liberating my voice as well,
Mm,
which I feel like is like really quite a big piece of what the show has gifted me. Because I think one of the things, obviously, out well, maybe not obviously, actually, part of my worldview is that we find our gifts in our wounds. And
mm,
when I was kind of starting to open up and share more of my, I guess you could say, my magic, my voice, I remember kind of going back a fair few years and going through my divorce. And at that time, I'd been just started. I think it might have even been around like when we met, and I was just starting to share more and more about like I remember doing this one post, and I was like reflecting on like the phrase "curiosity killed the cat," and like how conditioned we are to think like curiosity is this bad thing. And I'd
mm,
been talking about it, and I remember my ex-husband at the time sent me this message being like, "God, you're so weird. Like, why are you talking about this weird stuff?" And I remember it kind of like shut me down. And I didn't
mm,
really realize it until I came to, I guess, start this work with the witch and start kind of diving into sharing my voice in this way. I just kind of stopped using my voice for a
mm,
while until I began to work with the witch as a remedy to reclaim that aspect of me. Because, of course, the witch is very much associated with the witch wound and how women were kind of burned at the stake for sharing their views. And essentially, that innocently, that was what he was doing. And I say innocently because I feel like it's really important that people know that like this isn't something that people are consciously doing.
mm,
Um, and so it wasn't, it was his conditioning to burn me at the stake, if you like, metaphorically. But I remember going to even just like my yin yoga training in Bali, and we had to sit in this big circle of like 40 women. And I remember just like being there and being like, oh my God, I can't share my voice. Like they just asked us to share a
mm,
simple thing of like, why are you here? What's your intention? And I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared to speak. I think all I said was, I'm here to liberate my voice. And like then went bright red and was like, oh my God, like, you know? And so I think I've forgotten exactly what your question was, but like that's something I think it was about what the show had kind of gifted me.
gifts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that it really gifted me was like the capacity to share my vulnerability and share my voice and actually see that that was safe and that was okay. And, and even like when it wasn't okay, because people have branded me a charlatan or, called me a cult leader or lots of different things over the time that I've been creating the podcast. Funnily enough, I just wrote a post about that. But it was like, even through that, like, I was still okay. Like, I
Mm.
didn't die. It was all good.
Yeah. Wow. What an act of self-love. That's
I love
like,
that.
yeah, through the risk, I'm going to let myself have my voice back.
I love that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I honor your courage, and then you're gonna assist obviously already others in liberating their voice.
Mm, yeah.
And you have me curious, is there a remedy? Because maybe this is the one we're working with around voice liberation.
Yeah. I feel like The Witch, is so much of that, and, yeah, that's kind of the part of her medicine, given the witch wound. But also the one that comes to mind actually, because I worked with, an essence, and my essence was radiance, and I know that that's also yours.
Yes.
Like one of your gifts. And so when I think of radiance and I think of the different layers and the different remedies of the witch, because I see the witch as like she's like the main one that we learn to work with. And then she also has this like apothecary, and we always like can take down these remedies off the shelf
Mhm.
and look at aspects of ourselves through those. And I feel like Stella or Star is also a big remedy for that. That feels like a
Mm.
radiance remedy. You can give like the star shining bright. Um,
Yeah.
like
Oh, I like
yeah,
that one.
yeah. I feel like star
Nice.
is a good remedy.
Feels like there's some Stella on the side. Can I
Yes.
have a side of Stella with this episode? On ice, please. I love this. I love this. So we're kind of going backwards here, but you may have already said this because you just shared with the gifts and all of this and what was occurring with your ex-husband. But Do you remember the exact moment, the exact inner experience you were having that inspired you to say, "You know what?" And again, maybe it was about the voice, but were there any other elements or any other little moment you remember? I was sitting in the bathtub or I was out for a walk, that inspired you to actually go, "I'm gonna do this whole thing and create a podcast."
Mm. Do you know, I was thinking about this before we started to press record earlier. And I think I was trying to remember where the inspiration for The Secret Witch came from. And I think in general, I was doing the work with the witch and like
Mm,
really figuring out what my gifts were and seeing that. So it kind of came from that place. But I remember kind of channeling the phrase wild alchemy, and then the phrase the
mm,
secret witch came in afterwards. And I think it was just when that started to I kind of got a nudge. And I think again, part of the learning how to create and manifest life is to learn how to trust our wisdom and trust those intuitive nudges that we get. And so I think very much the secret witch was almost like channeled to me.
mm.
And it was almost like learning to trust that and follow that, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Following that internal, deeper impulse of life to just say, "This is the next
Mm.
thing for me."
Yeah. And I think again, another part of the secret witch is this kind of pattern of being busy and so busy that we don't
Mm,
create space for our witch. And that was very much something that I had to learn how to do. Like I had to learn how to become a conscious creator or a creatrix. There's the creatrix aspect of the witch. And so for the longest time before kind of being in the work with reclaiming this aspect of me, I had just been like the hamster on the busy wheel, like going round and round and round and just doing what I thought I should do, what was kind of expected of me. I had the brand career, I had the right relationship, and I kind of lined all my ducks up, but I was just keeping myself so busy that I didn't hear those nudges. And I think that's a big part of the reclamation of the witch is allowing ourselves to get quiet enough and slow
yeah.
down enough in being our feminine. I know this is a big part of your work as well, like, but being quiet enough to hear those nudges in the first place is a big part of the witch's reclamation.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. And because I think it does take great courage and all the stuff you had to do to even hear that this was like something that you wanted to embark on. What what maybe challenges or shadows or things came up that you had to move through to stay course and to say, "Hey, this is my truth. I'm going to honor it." What was the healing that was required or the shifts that were
Mm.
required to sustain and keep expanding on this journey?
Mm. I think one of the first things, actually, what comes to mind as you were talking there was with the wisdom piece as well, was just like the learning how to open my heart
Mm,
because there was so much fear around stepping into, like, I received this nudge. It's like, okay, Secret
yep.
Witch wants to be a podcast. Great. Then it's like, oh God, all this fear comes in. Like, well, who am I to create a podcast? Why would I bother doing that? Nobody's going to listen to me. Like, am I, experienced enough to share my wisdom? Am I going to fail? Like, all of these fears that come in when we start to open to our gifts,
Mm,
like those came in for me. So I think one of the first things, and I talk about this as like the element of heart opening, is like one of the first things that comes up when we step into that. And very much for me, like again, sharing vulnerably as well, sharing, experiences that possibly will be judged for. I remember I'd been doing a lot of writing. Writing was always one of the ways that I expressed before I went into creating a podcast. And I had shared an article with Tiny Buddha blog. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
yes,
like,
yeah, very well.
yeah. So like that, and I remember doing a couple of articles for them, and I remember it was during my divorce again, and I remember sharing this one article and my family like messaging me being like, "Why have you shared this? Like, you need to get that removed." And it was
Oof.
like, this has been read by like about, I can't even remember how many. It was like 4 million people or something that was reading that blog. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is awesome. Like, I want to celebrate it." And then instantly, like shame,
Mm,
fear. And so my heart was like, closure. I can't do this. Like, how can I start a podcast? Like, I've just had my writing criticized by my family who should be like really celebrating me. And like, there's all that fear that comes up as we start to see. So I'd like downloaded this vision. It's like, cool, great. This is going on my vision board. And it's like, then how do I actually take the aligned actions to lean into this when so much fear comes up? So I'd say the biggest thing was in learning to open my heart. I think the other thing is that there was a lot of heart opening work before I even got to the point of being able to see like you're being called to do a podcast. Because even though it's there in our wisdom, there's this
Mhm.
sense of like not fully being able to even see what we want to create from our hearts. Like I was coming from a very logical head perspective of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then the heart was like, no, you're going to create a podcast. And I was like, hang on, wait, what? Yeah. So it was, yeah, heart opening for me. And I kind of call this archetypal Rosa now, because you think
Mm.
of the rose in, tight in her bud, like wanting to open and bloom. And I think there was a lot of that going on to begin with. And then, of course, all the other remedies come in, like Aurum, which is about reclaiming our power, really learning to lead myself. And own my power to create and take those aligned actions. And then all sorts of other remedies like She Wolf, expressing my truth, and Luna, being unapologetically magical. So lots of different layers. I call those like the surface layers of all the witches, all secret witches that need healing along the way of creating.
Wow. That's so beautiful. As you were talking, I wrote down the courage to be you when you are projected upon.
Ooh, I love that.
It's
Yes.
like, bring it. And, I've always heard that from my mentors too. It's like and what this is to me, what I see, what you did, it's like you make that choice. You're like, this is the wisdom. I'm choosing this. And then the journey is the stuff comes up. And like
Mm.
you say, you meet it with the remedies and you go
Mhm.
through this journey. And I think maybe some people might say, I'm choosing it, and the stuff comes up. That means I can't come out of the witch closet. And I absolutely not. It's, follow Nicole's lead to say, hey, we're going to tend to this as it comes up and expand into the
Mm.
truth of who we are.
Yeah, I love that so much. That feels so beautiful. I love what you said there about like taking the remedies out, and yeah, yeah, that feels gorgeous. And what came up to me for me there as well was this piece about naturalness. I use that word because it came up in
Mhm.
my gene keys. So I think personality profiling as a tool in general, which is essentially what the archetypal apothecary modality is. Like we work with soul maps and soul plans in a similar way to gene keys, but I did a lot of work with gene keys, and naturalness, I think, is my life's work in essence. And so that's very much about being in the alchemy of this idea of perfection. So that was a huge thing for me in owning my witch, because I had this idea of like, I have to look a certain way. I have to be the good girl. I have to, have all my ducks lined up and have to get it all right. And there was a lot of fear around that. And what my gene keys, the whole alchemy of that with gene keys is, and this naturalness is that when we show up in our authentic selves, like that in itself is perfection.
Yes.
And I think that's also a gift that the show offered me, like just being able to see, like, oh, I don't have to get it right. And I don't have to be prepared and figure it all out. And we can,
And
like you
you're,
said, like we just live into
yeah.
it and meet what arises along the way.
Yes. And you're still loved, you know?
Mm, yeah.
So you have me curious because I'm listening as a listener too. When you say heart opening, that was to
Mm,
me the thing that stood out the most. Is there a simple thing you can offer listeners that, like, what does that look like? How do I open my heart as I'm
mm,
choosing into the truth of who I am? Like, how does that help me continue to stay open and not
mm.
close?
I love that. I think one of the biggest things is just really allowing ourselves to look at the fear that's coming up.
Mm,
Because I think it's so easy to like numb that out and like go, oh no, that can stay over there. I'm just gonna go over here and watch TV. Or, that was certainly my own journey, and softening. I think a lot of the work that I do is around like really embodying our feminine, because I think the modern world is so like masculine, so in that kind of push force hustle. And it's really allowing ourselves at times to slow down, attune to our hearts, and just bring some compassion, I think was the
Mm,
biggest thing as well. Like bring some compassion. And we need that compassion to even be able to go into looking at the fear, right? So unless we've got compassion and we bring compassion for ourselves, we're not going to see anything that's going to help us heal and alchemize any of it. So yeah, I got this visual like of just like wrapping ourselves in blankets and cozying
yeah.
up and like really just beginning to allow ourselves to hear what's actually in our hearts. And that's tricky for the witch because we talk about the witch wound, and this is a big part of the journey with the witch as well, is like there's this kind of, if we look at epigenetics or ancestral kind of wounding, the wounds of our ancestors kind of passes, epigenetically into our DNA. Like what they experience is kind of mapped out in the cells of our body. And so when we start to even think about slowing down, tuning in, hearing our wisdom, like witches were burned at the stake, literally, physically
Yeah.
killed for listening to their wisdom.
Yeah.
And so even that in itself often becomes something that we distract away from. So it's like the first step is just becoming conscious of the patterns that are stopping us from truly going in and listening. Like what's in the way of us opening our hearts, even. That's almost like the first place to look, and to look there with innocent, like with knowing that it's innocent, knowing that it's like something that we've been programmed into, like distracting away from like the feminine, our hearts, our wisdom.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, like you're saying, and you used that word earlier, curiosity. It's like just with
Mm.
gentleness and curiosity, what is under the hood right now? You know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. Cool. So I'm looking at some of these notes that I had down. Oh, we said this already, but there's a second part of this question that I wanted to ask you because we said what are some of the moments of magic that you've experienced, but
Mm.
moments that you are celebrating personally today, like exciting moments, maybe your favorite, well, some of your favorite guests. I know you said all of them are your favorite in different ways,
They
but
are
like,
though.
yeah, like moments of like excitement, wildness, celebration, anything that you can remember that you're like, that stood out. And I really
I
want to
love
like
it.
presence it right now.
You know what was wild? And I love this. Like, this is so magical. As I started to work with the witch to own my power to create, like, I just started to see how there was so much magic. Like, once we devote to something, so I was like, cool, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this secret witch show. And as soon as I'd said it, I got this email drop in my inbox from the agent of Don Miguel Ruiz. Ruiz, however you pronounce it.
Well,
Like,
in America,
yeah,
we say Ruiz, but whatever you want to say.
okay. Well, anyway, he is the multi-million, like, best-selling author of The Four Agreements, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you in on a secret. I didn't have a clue who he was.
This is amazing.
So I had like his agent dropped in and was like, "Cool, like we would love for you to like create," because I think I'd publicized the show. And they were like, "We'd love for Don Miguel to come on the show." I was like, amazing. And then I Googled him. I was like, oh shit. Like my first guest is like this multi-million bestseller.
Yeah, huge. No
And
big
I was
deal.
like, yeah, no big deal. Exactly. I was like, wow, okay. Well, when you commit to something, like in it comes effortless creation. So I think that
Wow.
was like one of the first early celebrations. I was like, this is utter magic. And he was an amazing guest. And his partner as well, Barbara Emrys, came on. And like there've just been so many moments like that where you just think, okay, this looks impossible. Like I'm just going to
Mm.
start this little show, and for me it was just like this little tiny thing, and then it's just created so much magic. But there are so many moments. Like I remember one of my favorite guests, Lucy Pierce, joined me, and she showed up naked. And we were talking about this. So I was on her show the other day, and we were talking about how funny this was because she just got so absorbed in listening to the show that she was late. And then she was like, "Well, I'm just going to show up." So she was naked. Bless her heart. And I just love like the conversations that you have and the experiences that you have as a show host or
Yeah.
hostess. Like, it's just magical, like, the authentic connection between, like, the people who give up their time to and carve out that space to share. I mean, like yourself, like, you've been on the show, and, like, people who carve out that time to gift their wisdom, Like
Mm.
that means so much to my heart, and just like it's just been magical. And I know I said like all my guests are favorites, and I say it every time I record because I'm like, oh my god, that was so juicy.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like every episode is just like gold to me.
I love Lucy. Like that's the name of a TV show, but like the courage to do that, that's amazing.
I know. It is amazing. Yeah. And she shocked me because she's the author of Creatrix and Medicine Woman and Burning
Yeah.
Woman.
Yeah.
And she said to me when I was on her show the other day, she was like, "Do you know, when I came on your podcast, it was the first time I outed myself as a witch." I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's like huge." And also, like, really? Like, you've
Yeah.
written all these magical witchy books.
Burning Woman.
I
Yeah.
guess people knew you were a witch before you came on my show.
That's so cool. I read that book. Very good.
Yeah,
Wow.
love that.
Um, maybe you already answered this, but I'm just curious if something stands out to you. Was there a moment, one thing someone said that changed you so deeply where you're like, I heard a
Ooh.
thing and I was listening and I was not, what is I'm changed now. There was this moment or I was so touched or something in me
Mm.
shifted that
Do you know
stands out
what?
to
I
you.
think one of the things, I don't know if it was necessarily just something he said, more just like the episode was so powerful in itself. Um, was Dean Radin. I loved his episode. Like he's a science researcher of magic. And
Okay. Oh, cool.
so what I just felt like that episode was so powerful and so healing for so many women because one of the biggest fears of the Secret Witch is this sense of like, is the magic really real? Can we trust it? Like, people doubt that. People doubt us for believing in magic. And here he was saying, magic is real and we're kind of
Wow.
proving it with science. And so I can't remember, there was something mind blowing he said. I can't remember what it was. Like there was a statistic that he had in it, but it's like by far our most popular episode. And I can't remember, there was like the last time I checked, it had over 8,000 listens just in one episode alone. It's probably got way more now because that was like probably 6 months ago. But yeah, I just loved his whole episode and just bringing science to something that feels like so removed from science. It's almost like
Mm.
there's a dichotomy in most secret witches' minds of like science or magic. Like it's like there's no either or. And he brought the two together, which felt so healing.
Deeply, deeply validating, right? It's like you
Yes.
feel validated, you feel seen, you feel known and recognized of something that
Mhm.
you know in your heart already.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
have to
So
give that episode
I
a
loved his
listen too.
yes, you definitely should. Yeah. It was amazing. I might re-listen to it.
Yes. Amazing. Um, so again, you may have touched on this, but I'm curious if there's one thing that stands out to you of any like your deepest fear around being seen as the witch. Um, on the podcast, in your own journey, because you've mentioned lots of different reclamations, but was there one for you that was like, yeah, this was definitely the hardest?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like there's quite a lot. My team, I remember when they used to listen back to the episodes, they would always like one of my team in particular, Shelley, she'd listen. She'd be like, "Do you know, this is so courageous, Nicole." She was like, "I can't believe you share all this so vulnerably." And I think potentially there was one episode where I really leaned into my edge and I shared something that had happened to me in my childhood about some trauma that felt particularly edgy. And I've forgotten your question now. What was your question? It was about
Yeah, one of like your biggest fears of being seen as the witch on the podcast in general,
yeah, I think just showing up vulnerably and
vulnerability.
sharing that truth. Um, because it feels like one of the things that I journeyed with always, being an autistic woman, and having had a childhood which totally now is made sense of being
Yeah.
autistic, like through the podcast actually was where I realized that I was autistic. And funny enough, Lucy Pierce, when she came on that day, naked, she was like, "Oh, you're autistic, aren't you?" And I was like, "Oh, well, yes, actually, I am. But it's a good job I kind of knew because that would have been brilliant." And I think just that kind of temptation as someone who is neurodivergent and particularly autistic, and something that was a big wounding that I'd learned, my whole life was this sense of like having to mask who I was.
Mhm.
And so the vulnerability of no longer masking and just showing up and sharing my truth, particularly when I had wounding around my truth not being believed, or, and that's what I was referring to when I was sharing about the trauma in my childhood. Like that for me, I think was one of the edgier things that the podcast required of me. And I think also, when we're called, it's a very, very important point to make because when we're called by soul, often it
Yeah.
will call us in ways that do feel edgy. Like we often expect that it's all going to be flowers and roses and chocolates. And that was something that the podcast really helped me to see. It's like, okay, I'm being called to this and it should be really easy, but actually there's a whole load of healing for me to even just show up and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just keep as I'm sitting with you, I keep feeling courage, 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 like
Mm.
your person was saying. And I'm in a nervous system training course right now, and that's what she talks about too, that it's okay. And the science behind it is it's going to feel uncomfortable, and
Mm.
we must move through that to then have more comfortable experiences. So I love that
Mm.
you are allowing yourself to, it's almost like, yes, you're going through the fire, but you're doing it gently. You're doing it,
Yes.
and that's really important to like, I'm going to love myself through the fire at my own pace in my own time.
I love that so much. That's so, so important. And another big thing I think that the show gifted to me is really in action, live in action, tending my nervous system as I was showing up to meet those challenges. It was almost like, I say often we live into our medicine. And it was one of the ways that I lived into mine, like showing up at what I call my soft edge. Cause, I trained as a
Yeah.
yin teacher and yin, we have like what's called our soft edge. And that's the kind of edge that I invite women into. Is like we're often
Mm,
taught this sense of like feel the fear and do it anyway, push ourselves. And it's like, no, that's very much the masculine way that we've been conditioned into. Like we want to kind of ease back and like really slow down and soften and tend to the fear that's coming up as we lean into these edges and make them softer edges. Like what's that one next small step that we can take that is maybe going to have us at like a 7 out of 10 edge instead of like a 12 out of 10 edge. And that's
that's it.
partly what the show gifted to me as well, and how I could tend to my body as I was sharing these vulnerable things.
That's amazing.
Mm.
Yeah. So much divine love I feel that's coming through. You're just like, I'm going to do this, but through. So I'm teaching a course right now. We talk about, it's called Lioness, and we talk about softness and fierceness at the same time. And I feel that in you.
I
It's
love
like, I'm
that.
going in this direction because my wisdom says, but I will bring softness to it.
Yeah, I love that. I saw I think I pulled a card for a client earlier that was the lion. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
this is perfect for today. Jamie.
yes, I am Lion Queen. Um, so, there are many archetypes
Mm.
and feminine archetypes. How did you know that it was the witch that was calling to you as opposed to the Secret Priestess podcast or the Secret
Mm.
Shaman podcast? Um, did she, what were her whispers like, to you that was like, this is the archetype that I'm going to journey with right now?
Yeah, I love this question. And you and I had a similar journey because I think we began a process with the archetypes at a similar time.
Yes.
And so I was in this kind of process with feminine archetypes and like really allowing them to speak through me and much as you were also probably doing. And like I remember, it was funny actually. I can't remember exactly what led me to it other than like there's obviously aspects of the witch that had been suppressed within me. So the healer, the creatrix, the wise woman. There's lots of different
Mm,
elements of the witch and the feminine power. And I'd kind of been hearing, and also darkness as well in the witch has been a
mm,
really, really big theme, because I used to get really like annoyed with priestesses.
Oh no.
The priestess would trigger me. I'd be like, well, what are you doing floating around up there in the, I'm all happy and joyful. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
fuck this shit. Like there's so much going on down here that's like, where's the darkness? Like honor our humanness. I know that's not you at all. Like you are, your thing is like divinely human, right? So I know
Yes, that's it.
all my own trigger. I'd
Yeah.
like, but it was the witch calling to me because
Mm.
I was in the darkness and I was like, we need the darkness. And the way I create is through burning things down and going into the darkness. So I think that was very much one way that she called to me. Like she was bringing me back down to earth because I had kind of been floating a bit in an ascension, what I call now an ascension path, like seeing the oneness of everything, seeing
Yeah.
divinity, seeing, love and this greater natural intelligence of life. But in doing so, I kind of bypassed my original teachings and my original medicine of homeopathy about like really being in the body and meeting ourselves in the darkness. So that was one way. But I think I told the story on the podcast before where as soon as I was like, oh, I'm the witch. And I remember saying to our guide and being like, messaging her, being like, I think it's the witch. I think I'm the witch. And as soon as I said it, my house
Mm.
set on fire. So I was like, yeah, okay, there's a sign, there's a synchronicity.
Oh my God. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, thank you for that. The 3 fire engines outside can just put that out and go.
Thank you. I'm a witch. I'm good
Yeah,
now.
got the message. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, didn't come gently, you know?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, definitely
I, lo-
not.
I love that. I love that. Well, I also have here, Angel, some questions from some of your listeners.
Hmm.
Would you like
Yeah,
to unpack some of those?
I
Okay.
would. Yeah, let's dive into those.
Yeah, this is awesome. Okay. So, all right, I'm just going to read some of the listener questions. So, was there any breakthrough, like a specific moment in time, or was it a transparent transition when you decided to embrace your gift as a healer? Did you gradually, intuitively, and gracefully accept your call without any certain ups and downs? I'm asking this because I wonder if healers have to heal themselves, this is a great question, to test their
Mm.
power before truly embracing it, or is it something earned at some point?
I love this question so much. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, it was not graceful. In
Yeah.
fact, I remember having this whole exploration with my guide around grace. And I was like, sod grace. Like, I don't want grace. Because there's the witch in that, right? She's like, no, I'm not gonna be graceful. Like this is dark and gritty, and I don't need to be graceful. And I was like, grace is for the priestess. This is
No
so
idea
funny.
how you felt.
And yeah, so it definitely wasn't safe because I think the witch calls to us through chaos. She
Mm,
calls to us by us wanting to burn things down. She often also, being a healer, has an unusual amount of trauma herself to be able to heal for herself so that we can go on and then share the medicine that we have got from almost like having, I often describe it as like our own heroine's journey. Like we have to go through our heroine's journey so that we can then express the gold that we've reclaimed from that. People are medicine. We can only be medicine by having journeyed through that darkness of the witch in order to like fully express like the learnings of that. And that's how then as we're doing that and as we're living it and as we're sharing that, that's how people become activated. So when I'm sharing about, my own struggles with perfectionism or failure or like the chaos of the witch, like other women who are archetypal phosphorus or the witch will be hearing that and it be resonating somewhere within. And there may be deep resistance to that, which is something I've also found with the witch. Is like who she's called. Like there's like resonance. There's also like, oh God, no! Like I am
mm,
not a witch. So there's stuff to move through, but whatever is coming up in that journey is material for our liberation. So there were lots. It's almost like there's lots of lots of breakthroughs. Um, but it kind of was gradual, but also like we do have to, those are there for our material for liberation. They're there for us to be able to fully become a medicine woman, become a healer. We're sold, and this is something I talk about a lot actually, is that we're sold this idea of like, okay, we'll just go and get a Reiki certificate and then we'll go off and start being a healer and that's it. It's like it's sold to be this like quick process, especially when it's taught online or and that's not just Reiki, that's any kind of healing modality can be sold in that way as almost like a quick fix. And we're taught even, we're taught to relate to the world as a quick fix thing. Like we'll go to doctors and we'll outsource our healing to them and they'll just put a sticky plaster over it. But it's the same with our healing. And often even spiritual paths will be like, okay, come here, get this quick fix. And so that's something I'm passionate about letting people know is that becoming a healer, becoming a witch, becoming a medicine woman, whatever word you really want to use, like if the witch triggers you, use the word healer. Um,
Mm.
there is that is becoming like it takes time. It takes, I say, like 3 years to kind of be in that process of healing ourselves, discovering our gifts, learning how to express those in the world. And so that is something that I'm really passionate about letting women know, because I think it also offers this sense of relief. Because without that, we're stuck thinking we're just going to do a Reiki certificate and then go off and be a healer and earn loads of money and it's all wonderful.
I love that answer, and it's so beautiful you use the word becoming. It's a
Mm.
becoming. I've heard that all week, and
Oh.
I more than normal, and that's what I titled my journals called Becoming the Lioness, and it's so interesting.
Mm.
It's really standing out to me. And I there's another question I have in your answer, but, it I remember our teacher who
Mm.
you
Mhm.
referenced to saying to me because I was obsessed, oh my god, and I mean, I kinda still am a little bit, "What's my medicine? What's my medicine? What's my medicine? Tell me my medicine." And
Mhm.
she didn't use these words, but she would say to me what you're saying to your listeners and to me, "Honey, it's a becoming."
Mm.
Like, let yourself have 20 years. Let yourself have 30 years. Let yourself
Mm.
not know. Let yourself fail. Let yourself make mistakes. Let yourself figure it out. Let yourself one day go, that's what it was all about.
Mm.
And there
Yeah.
is a release in that to be like, I'm learning, I'm figuring it out, I'm seeing. And so I think my next question in this, because, I've heard this from my students when I became a Reiki master, there is a hesitancy for people to like, where's the balance here? There is a
Mm.
hesitancy for people to begin because they think I have to be totally healed before
Mm.
I begin. And at what point in my becoming can I charge for my services or be out of the secret witch closet? Like, what kind of advice you give of like, because you were saying too, you do meet people where you are where they
Mm.
are in your medicine. So, like, is there a point where you say, study first, heal first, and then, or, where is that fine line for you in your mind?
Yeah, I love that question because that comes up a lot for women as well. When I say
Yeah.
we have to become a healer first, we have to heal and alchemize for ourselves. Of course, that is the caveat that like we're always healing. We're always going to be healing. We're never going to be fully healed. Like really, I see healing as learning how to meet ourselves in whatever arises. And there will be certain wounds and certain, I call them remedy relationships that we're here to journey within this lifetime that will keep cycling round and like we'll go deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like every time I teach a remedy, it will take me into the same, deeper spiral of the same healing, of the same remedy. Like it's not like I go and teach Luna and she just initiates everyone else and doesn't initiate me. Like she's taken me deep. I'm just about to serve her this week and she's taken me deep. So what I say to that is like we're never gonna be healed. Like we're always
Right.
gonna be healing. What I'm teaching women is how to work with that healing, how to learn to heal themselves, how to be in that process of healing, of learning to be in ongoing healing and learning how to do that, how to journey that for themselves. Um, and so what I would say to women who are then maybe like holding back because like, okay, I need to heal myself first, is like we're always going to be slightly further ahead than someone.
Mm,
And
that's it.
so it's like, who can we help from where we are? Like we don't need to have fully alchemized, say, the witch to teach, aspects of the witch. or whatever the remedy is, there's always going to be something that we have healed and alchemized for ourselves. And it's figuring out what that is and meeting ourselves honestly in that, because I think there can be this temptation, particularly in the witch, to be further ahead. I know that I speaking from experience, like I wanted to have fully healed and alchemized and be like, okay, like
Yeah.
I am now like the fully healed and I can, do all of this, but we have to meet ourselves where we are. And that was also one of the challenges for me, because again, this kind of idea of having to be perfect, having to have healed perfectly
Mm.
in order to meet someone else, but in that. And yeah, there's always someone we can help.
I love that. It's like continue your expansion and you always have wisdom to share from where you are.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
What a great answer. That's so permission giving.
Mm, good.
So I have a question for you. Do you sing? Do you
I
chant?
love this.
This is also your audience question. They say you have an angelic voice, which you do. You're a
Thank
very
you.
gentle soul. And you can tell us your story around it because that's also part of reclaiming your voice.
It is. It's so funny. I loved this question because
Yeah.
it was like an ask me anything kind of vibe.
Yep.
And so this question came in like, do you sing or chant? I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to sing on the podcast. Like, and I'm like, well, what could but like, I'm thinking maybe I will sing at some point on the show. Like, that feels like a nice aim to like meet my
Yes.
edge. But what
Yes.
what it made me think of was a little secret that probably nobody knows about me, that I auditioned for the X Factor.
I read that and thought, wow, I didn't know that about you.
I
That's
know.
cool.
This was like once upon a time. And I guess in some ways that was like part of the reclamation of my voice, even just in a different version, like perhaps a more mundane version of like reclaiming my voice in some ways. But yeah, it makes me laugh because I look back and I think the song that I sang was like, I wish I was a punk rocker with flowers in my hair. So I was like even manifesting life now.
That's amazing. It's like sometimes we look back and we're like, you were so cool. And like, I didn't even know it back then, you know?
I know. But I actually do love singing. I do love singing. So maybe at some point I will sing in an episode and that could be, yeah, that feels good.
That would be the Stella episode, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, where
Oh,
you
I love
reclaim
it.
your voice and you
Uh-huh.
shine like the star
Yeah,
that you are. Well, I will be tuning in for that one.
I love that. Yeah.
Yes. So, next question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. It probably depends on each person's individual soul, but how much of a role do you think joy, oh, I love this one,
I knew you would
plays?
love this one.
That's my thing.
Priestess
Um,
vibes.
yes. How much of a role do you think joy plays in creating our desires and in our healing? We hear so much about it in the ascension and law of attraction world, but in your experience of going into the body and into the darkness, how important is it? And is it something you have consciously cultivated, or is it a natural consequence of your healing, or both? Wow, great question.
I know. I love this question too. And yeah, we've kind of spoken to it a little bit in terms of the experience of the darkness that comes up in the witch. But I think what I'd like to add is the sense of like, because there's first and foremost, I believe there's almost like a process of like with the feminine, we hold the paradox, right? So there's a making sure we're not suppressing and diminishing the darkness and being like, oh well, never mind, like kind of pushing over, like brushing over it and suppressing it.
Mhm.
Because for me, the true art of healing is about unsuppressing, like unsuppressing our souls. That's what I believe like, healing to be. And
Yes.
so I had this whole journey where like with ascension, I was bypassing all the depression, all the depressing stuff, all the darkness. And so for me, there's like a huge importance to being with the truth, being with darkness, being with and meeting ourselves there. And that was also something I had to journey with in terms of because part of my essence as well, when we talked about the essence being radiance, my essence is also joy. And I
Mm.
remember when I first got given that essence by my guide, and I'm trying to think of the remedy this would be. It's not coming to me, but like when I started, it would be something like yellow, like the color yellow, it feels to me just in the moment. Like when I started to journey with reclaiming joy, I kind of actually had to work with a different word because, and that might not make a lot of sense to those who are listening, but in essence, like, um, joy is kind of part of my personality, if you like. But I had so much wounding around joy
Yeah.
that I would like kind of push that away and focus on the darkness. And so part of my journey was really learning to make joy safe and like
Yes.
unpack the darkness around joy, like unpack all the stuff that had me suppress joy. So things like my dad leaving on my first day of school and me having been like really excited for the process of going to school. And it also being the same day that I was like, we were meant to have my adopted sister join us from Romania. Like I was super excited. I'd wrapped her up this gorgeous red fluffy pencil case. And she was like 3 and I was 4. And then my dad left on that first day of school and like just obliterated life as I knew it. And so it was like, oh, joy isn't safe. And that's really the story that I learned as a little girl. And so there's a lot of inner child work, a lot of venturing into that darkness around the experience of joy that had me like able to then start to go, okay, maybe I can reclaim this aspect of me. Maybe I can start to open to joy. And so
Mm.
for me, like this, I often talk about things in like shadow poles, like the shadow pole of joy is either we can be stuck in like the gloomy, I call it like Eeyore end of the
Yeah.
scale, like where everything is darkness, or there's the kind of bypassy, rose tinted end of the scale. And we kind of like swing between the two. And for me, the work is learning how to really be with the darkness whilst also cultivating that safety within our body, within our nervous system, again, to open our hearts to joy, to cultivate a relationship with joy and have that feel safe. And that was like my journey with it. I don't know if you've got anything to add on that because I feel like this is like your specialist area.
Yeah, yes, I love that. My heart breaks for little baby Nicole. I just want to
Mm,
give her a hug.
thank you.
And so that makes sense. And I had different experiences with reclaiming joy too. I am a priestess at heart, so I always was very joyful, but was told it was too
Mm,
much. So I
mm,
always thought I was obnoxious or annoying or
mm,
bothersome was my
mm,
experience. Um, and yeah, it is such a I remember, I think it was Robert Holden, and I think he used the word, it was joy, but he said joy is radical.
mm,
Like it to be in these high frequencies and to reclaim them is not an easy task, you know? Um, and what I'm feeling as we talk too is that integration of divinity and humanity, a journey
mm.
you and I have both been on because we both
Yeah.
went through that. This listener's question about law of attraction and ascension. It's the masculine, and then we've got the feminine, which is the
Mm,
embodiment and the feelings, and a journey I am also very much a part of. We It's like the answer is, "Hey, it's both." The answer
mm,
is, and I always say this to my, because you asked me for this little,
mm.
I say this to my people, when you're dark and you're low and you're in your emotion, well, tend to that. That's what's here. Hunker
Mhm.
down, feel your
Yeah.
feelings. And then when you're a little bit lighter, play with your magic. You know,
Mm,
see what brings you joy. Go do something that feels good. So it's like a time appropriate thing. It doesn't have to be, well, when I'm in the dungeon, um, for lack of a better word, I've
mm.
gotta be positive and find my joy. It's like, no, 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 you're in the
Yeah.
darkness, tend to the darkness.
I
You're in
love
the
that.
light, expand in more light. It's
Yeah.
both.
I love that so much. Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. And it's like that paradox. It's learning the art of holding that paradox, I think,
Mm,
that's
that's
been,
it.
yeah, that's been a big part of my journey. And I think the witch particularly does have this kind of resonance and relationship to darkness, that will have her either trapped there or feeling trapped there, or like kind of like bypassing the darkness and like forcing joy, like that kind of whole like, okay, I'm feeling darkness, but I'm gonna like go and do affirmations and try and get myself out of it because it's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely not.
Mm.
Gorgeous. Okay, we have one more listener question. You ready?
Yeah.
You kinda
Go.
answered this a little bit, but we can elaborate.
Sure.
How important are traditional qualifications to our credibility? I see they are often referred to by magical ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this question because again, like, there's a very human and also a lot of like conditioning around this. Because I think, we have to meet ourselves in the world that we're in as well. So for some purposes, qualifications can be really serving. So I'm thinking
Hmm.
of the kind of examples are where maybe we might want insurance as healers. So for example, I trained in lots of different modalities and then I was able to gain insurance. And I can think of clients who have, discovered that they're here for, say, like to be a birth keeper or, whatever it is. And they've gone on to do qualifications that have given them the capacity to be able to then be insured for that. So I think there's like a fine line. And then that on one hand, like there's that, and then we can start to think, oh, maybe I'm not qualified enough. Like, so there's a shadow
Mm.
to this as well. So we can go into that kind of extreme shadow pole of then thinking, well, I'm not qualified enough. I need to know more. So qualifications can also become this like BT stick, like where we do one and we're like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. I need to do more and more and more. So for us, and that's like really coming from this sense of like who we are as our witch isn't valid.
Mm.
Or we can completely reject them and be like, well, I don't want any qualifications and, they're pointless and I'm going to just rebel against the whole thing. So there's like there's a lot of shadow, I think, in this question that can come up for people. And really, whenever there's shadow, that's just an invitation for us to see like what's coming up for us in this question, even like
Mm.
what do qualifications mean to me? What am I projecting onto qualifications? Like, what would it mean to me to have the qualification? And I think there's a whole kind of almost like inquiry there that's helpful for us to arrive at our truth around what's aligned for us.
I love that.
Mm.
I'm
The other
feeling
thing,
in a go ahead.
no, I was just going to say the other thing, particularly when we're talking about archetypal remedies, is that we can have this sense again, we're conditioned into thinking that like we need to logicize everything, like we need to learn the archetypes, we need to, know all the personality profiles. And I know for me, like I've learned, there's so many remedies, like particularly homeopathically. I think we learned like 50, 60, 70, however many remedies. And
Mm.
there's a temptation to kind of jump in and be like, okay, I'm going to learn this archetype. I'm going to learn this remedy. Whereas the most successful way I've learned remedies is through the embodiment of them, through directly working with them. And I think that's perhaps the most important thing to take away is like it's our embodied experience. When we're talking about being healers and becoming healers and sharing our medicine, we have to take our medicine so that we can learn and like really like feel into that remedy for ourselves to be able to teach from that place. Like for me, that's the most important thing.
That feels like the moral of the story, right? With your podcast journey,
Mm.
with your journey, it's like, it can't be intellectual. It needs to be an embodied experience of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
Mm.
love that. And discerning in the moment. And like, we can use anything innocently as an excuse to not step into our power. I'm not
Mm.
qualified enough. I'm not this. So if it's aligned, like you said, I love that. Take the thing. But sometimes we do have a natural propensity for something
Mm. Yeah.
and people show up,
Mm.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
Also, yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you, unless, you say to me, is there anything else you want to share? Because I'll probably
Mm.
say that at the end. Um, it's two questions that are coming to me. If somebody's inspired by this, which I know
Mhm.
many people will be, of like, and so maybe it is a podcast, maybe it's something else of like, I want to go on this journey too. I'm hearing my wisdom. So let's say a podcast first.
Mhm.
What would be a gentle first step you would say to somebody after listening to this of like my wisdom saying, I want to start a podcast too? What would you say to them? Or like one or two, this is where to begin on
Mm.
this journey that I wish I had shared with younger Nicole from a few years ago that was starting this
Mm.
journey, but I can share this with you now.
I love that. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is like self-celebration for the fact that you've even heard
Oh,
that. Like just like owning that you have been able to hear that, like that's huge. And we don't celebrate ourselves for being able to listen in to that nudge, to that wisdom, because that takes courage in and of itself. So first and foremost, self-celebration. And then also, I think one of the things that helped me was to just get like really clear on my vision. Like, what was it that I wanted to create? And that might not always look like how we expect. So, for example, we can often think that we're in this work for money or, whatever it is that looks like success to us. But often there's like kind of a deeper soul calling, a deeper like purpose hidden underneath. And so I think my biggest invitation is to like come to your heart and be like, what is it I truly want to create here? Like, what's the feeling of it? And creating from that place. And when I say creating, I guess I mean just taking the next step after the next step that's revealed to you as well, rather than coming at it from a like, okay, it's got to be this, it's got to look this way. Like, there's a very much a like discovery process that I would invite women into. And also, like, there's so much healing around that perfection piece and around all the fears that can come up, which is the importance of the work with the secret witch, really, because often she will have these fears and think that like she's not cut out for it. And my point of view is that whenever we're feeling fear, like we haven't been called to that for no reason. Like we wouldn't even think of it if it wasn't aligned for us. You're not going to be like, do you know what? I think I want to start a podcast and it not be aligned. So yeah, it doesn't any fear that comes up in that journey does not mean that it's not cut you're not cut out for it. It means that there's just more perhaps healing to do of your wounded healer, of your secret witch, and to focus there. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. That's so loving.
I love that.
So, what are you celebrating yourself
Ooh,
yourself for today?
what am I celebrating myself for? I think just creating a podcast.
No big deal.
No big deal. I mean, 100 episodes is
Yeah.
magical. Like,
Yeah.
I had no idea that I'd still be going at the 100th episode, and let alone that kind of top 10%, which I'm by the way shouting about all over the place. Like I'm so happy about that. Like it's just been such a magical like the whole thing has just, in essence, changed my life. I've had so many rich, juicy conversations with magical people. I've had so many women being like, this show is amazing. It's changed my life. There's lots of, yeah, it's just magic, so much magic. So I'm celebrating all of it. Yeah, just feels amazing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And any additional, like as we move to the end of this beautiful celebratory episode, any additional advice you want to give to the secret witches listening on, reclaiming their power or their magic or um listening to their wisdom or celebrating themselves, just anything on your heart that you want the listeners that have been on this journey with you to just
Mm,
know, just from your heart to theirs.
yeah. I think just that the temptation to hide is always going to be something that kind of compels us. Like, it's
Mm,
not like I turn up to the episode and that I'm creating and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm free of all of this now because I've been doing it for 100 episodes. Like, there is still always going to be that temptation to hide. Like, I've just recently, this is another thing to celebrate. We've just started doing video episodes. And I was like, oh God, like I was feeling this call to like do video. And then I was like, oh my goodness. But then that's like a new edge because I'm no longer just me and my mic. Like that temptation to hide is a wound that likely will always be there. And the real work is allowing ourselves that permission to lean in anyway.
mm,
And there's still that temptation to be compelled by the fear of like, I know I think I talked to this briefly in the notes and I was reflecting on it. Like over the years, I've been, called a charlatan or, woo woo or all these kind of different names. Like, I would talk about Luna being the lunatic. We can be judged, we can fear being rejected and judged for being a lunatic when we're embracing our woo. And what we think is going to kill us doesn't kill us. So it's like, even though we will feel compelled by that fear, our work is to love ourselves in that, like to love ourselves in the fear and allow ourselves to whatever comes up, like allow it and still take those tender next steps. Like have the courage to like love ourselves through whatever comes up.
mm. That's beautiful. I'm just witnessing you in that you're on it, you're in it, you're doing it. You are love is the medicine that is carrying you through and allowing you to spread your wings and shine your
Mm,
light. So for all of those that I'm giving a voice to in the moment. For every listener that's ever tuned in for a second or the entire episode, thank you.
That's so gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the listeners that kind of make the show, really.
Yeah.
We're showing up because of people listening.
And to end with this question, what are some of the things that have touched you that listeners have said or shared with you? Do you have any just offhand of
Mm,
thank yous or things that they learned or have appreciated
yeah.
from your podcast?
Yeah. Do you know, yeah, it's just there's so many. And I think one of the things that always makes me chuckle about The Secret Witch is that she loves the show, and then like never shares that she listens to it. It's something that always makes me laugh. Like get like these emails being like, "Oh my god, this show's amazing! It changed my life." Like it's like a treasure trove of like magic. But then she's also like, "But I haven't told anybody about it because what if somebody finds out that I'm a witch?" I think that's just something magical to me, because although it kind of makes it harder to grow the show in many ways. So please do like review and share. But equally, I feel you. Like I feel you, and keep listening to the show because that will help with that. But yeah, there's just so many gorgeous comments that people share with me in my inbox. And it just makes it so worth it. So worth like
Mm.
leaning into all of the fear that comes up as we kind of share our medicine. Yeah. Like the treasure trove is probably my favorite comment. It's like a treasure trove of all the magic.
Yeah, because that's what you are, a treasure
Oh,
trove of all the magic.
an apothecary. Yes. I love it.
Yes, I
And it's
am
not
an
just
apothecary.
me. I'm a mirror for what is in you.
Yeah, woo! So you also have the priestess and I also have the witch.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't choose to take the priestess down. I don't know. I'm only joking. I have worked with her. But
We
in
balance each
fact,
other well.
archetypal Naja is the priestess. So snake.
Ooh,
Ooh, she's very juicy actually. So yeah.
I didn't know that one. Thank
Mm.
you. Well, any last things you wanna share, or do you feel complete?
Mm. No, it's been gorgeous. I do feel complete actually. It's been just such a gorgeous conversation as ever. And it's really nice to be just like in the back seat being asked
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, right, and can bring up stuff too, right? When you're on the
Yeah.
receiving end? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you for joining us today, Miss Nicole. We
Oh.
appreciate you and we celebrate you. And as we were just talking about, I invite you to meet your soft edge. And if any of these episodes have opened your heart or put you back on your path or inspired you, please do share with a safe person in a
Mm,
safe way to meet that edge of like, okay, I'm going to let myself out of the closet a little bit, because
mm,
we can, and Nicole can share this medicine with more people.
mm.
So thank you for being with us today. We will see you in the next episode. And we
Yeah.
wish you all a beautiful, empowered, magical rest of your day.
Oh, I feel quite emotional actually as we're completing. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much, Jamie. I loved having this conversation, and yeah, I just had a sense we'd have a magical conversation. So yeah, thank you.
My honor.
Oh my goodness, I absolutely loved being interviewed on the show. And here are my takeaways. The Secret Witch is a sensitive woman who is secretly powerful and magical and longs to live her destiny as a healer, but who feels burdened and burned out by her mundane life of busyness, where she runs around people pleasing and feeling exhausted and hiding her true self. By working with the witch as a mirror for aspects of ourselves that we've shamed, we can open to our inner apothecary for self-healing, discover our healing gifts, and learn to express them in the world. The witch as an archetypal remedy, aka a lens for self-discovery, represents healing, creation, and feminine power and true soul expression. And that's what she helps us to reclaim, if we can have a courageous, vulnerable, open heart to our possibility. there can be a lot of fear that arises in that journey of self-healing and becoming a healer. And that is normal. Our fear is often a confirmation of the path that we're being called to. And embracing and sharing our vulnerability, our fears, and our authentic selves is crucial in reclaiming our voice and power, even and especially when people think that we're weird. Reclaiming our gifts and voice is an embodied journey of living into our medicine. We each have our own unique archetypal remedy to share, and we have to reclaim our gifts through an embodied experience rather than learning intellectually. And working with archetypal remedies is a great way to do this. This podcast is a great example of how I lived into my medicine as I listened to the intuitive nudges of my soul and healed and expanded myself, leaning into my true soul expression. Healing is an ongoing process. It will never be complete. And the real gift is learning the art and science of loving, compassionate self-healing so that we can provide that for ourselves throughout our lives, learning to tenderly meet challenges and reclaim our gifts from our wounds, and celebrate our small victories, taking the next aligned action as we go. Sharing our voice and our medicine can be scary because of the witch wound. And if we're fearing that, it's just a sign that there's more healing to do of our inner witch, who has often experienced much trauma in her lifetime. This is something that I have lived into and am still living into as I've journeyed with creating the podcast. And here we are with a treasure trove of over 100 episodes later, with a top 10% show that's helped thousands of women. It's so worth the journey.